Hello, everybody. Today's story is called The Wine of Lai Po. In the land of Lai Po, they made a very special wine. It was deep red in colour, it tasted like nectar, and it kept forever. But it had one other special quality, which made it more special than any wine in the world. Whoever drank the wine of Lai Po would speak the truth, and only the truth, as long as its influence lasted. Now you might think that a wine with such wonderful properties would be in great demand, and that the vineyards of Lai Po would have had difficulty in producing enough grapes. But quite the reverse was true. It seemed that fewer and fewer people dared to drink the wine of Lai Po for fear that they would have to tell the truth. And the cellars became filled with barrels and bottles of wine that nobody would buy. At length, there was only one winemaker left in the whole of Lai Po. "I cannot understand," he said, "why everyone is so afraid of the truth. In my father's time, everyone drank the wine and enjoyed it, and if they had to tell the truth for half a day after, it was no matter to them." One day, however, the king of a distant country got to hear of the famous wine of Lai Po, so he said to his Lord Chancellor, "Lord Chancellor, it is time I found out who are my trusty subjects and who are not. I want you to arrange for everyone in my kingdom to drink the wine of Lai Po and to present themselves to me for questioning." When the Lord Chancellor heard this command, he shook with fear, for he had many dark secrets that he dreaded the king might find out. But he smiled and said, "An excellent idea, Your Majesty. May I be the first to try it out?" "Good," said the king. "See to it straight away." So the Lord Chancellor ordered all the barrels of wine in Lai Po to be brought up and carried in carts over the country to his own land. Then the wine was put in bottles, and everybody's name was written on each bottle. Then the bottles were carefully placed in a huge rack in the main marketplace, and 7 soldiers were put on duty to guard them day and night. The Lord Chancellor, meanwhile, was racking his brain to think how he could avoid the test himself, for fear he should reveal any of his own dark and guilty secrets to the king. So too were all the other members of the king's council, for they all had dark and guilty secrets. The same went for all the other lords and ladies, and lawyers and doctors and innkeepers and shopkeepers. In fact, every single person in the land was trying his hardest to think how he could avoid drinking the wine of Lai Po and having to tell the truth to the king. Then the Lord Chancellor hit upon a plan. He had a sleeping potion put into the guards' drinks, and then, at dead of night, when they had all fallen asleep, the Chancellor crept down to the marketplace and took the bottle of wine which bore his name, emptied it out, and refilled it with ordinary wine. Then he made his way home, satisfied that when his turn came, he would not have to tell the truth. The same plan had also occurred to the other members of the king's council, and each one of them crept down to the market square during the night that followed, and each, unknown to the others, substituted ordinary wine in the bottle which bore his name. It was not long, of course, before word got out that the guards were asleep all night, and very soon all the other lords and ladies had taken the opportunity to do the self-same thing. So too did all the lawyers and doctors and innkeepers and shopkeepers and craftsmen. In short, by the time the day of the tasting came, every one of those bottles of the wine of Lai Po had been emptied and refilled with ordinary wine. The whole town was buzzing with excitement. The streets were full and the marketplace was bursting with crowds. Everyone in the kingdom was there except for one notorious robber who had been hiding up in the hills for several years. As soon as it was light, the king took his place on his throne and summoned the Lord Chancellor forward. "My Lord Chancellor," he said, "since you are the most eminent of all my subjects, you shall commence." The Lord Chancellor smiled, filled his goblet, and drank it down, and said, "Now I am ready to answer any questions you wish, Your Majesty." "Very well," said the king. "First, tell me this. Are you a good and loyal subject?" "Indeed I am," replied the Lord Chancellor, although at that very moment he was plotting to overthrow the king. "Secondly," said the king, "do you think I am a wise ruler?" "Indeed I do," exclaimed the Lord Chancellor, although secretly he thought, "What a fool the king is making of himself." "And lastly," said the king, "how does the wine of Lai Po taste?" "It tastes like nectar distilled from all the flowers of heaven," said the Lord Chancellor. "Very good," said the king. "You may step down." The next drink went to the Prime Minister, and the king asked him the same 3 questions. And the Prime Minister made very similar answers, although he was really no better than the Lord Chancellor. And so they went on through all the king's council, and all the lords and ladies, and the lawyers and doctors, and the townsfolk and the countryfolk. And because they had all emptied the wine of Lai Po out of bottles that bore their names and replaced it with ordinary wine, none of them was afraid of answering any of the king's questions. Well, the questioning went on all that day, and all the next day, and all the day after that, until, just as they were questioning the very last subject of all, some soldiers arrived with the robber whom they had caught stealing in broad daylight while everyone else was in the city. They hauled him up before the king, and the king ordered him to drink the wine of Lai Po, and then answer the questions that he would put to him. Now the robber did not know that all the wine of Lai Po had been poured away, and so he took the cup with fear and trembling, but he drank all the same. Then he faced the king. "Firstly, are you a good and loyal subject?" asked the king. "You know me for what I am," replied the robber. "I've robbed your kingdom for many years." "Shame!" cried all the people. "Secondly, do you think I am a wise ruler?" "I've nothing to lose by telling the truth," replied the robber. "And the truth is, a wise ruler would decide for himself which of his subjects he could trust." "Traitor!" shouted the crowd. "Lastly," said the king, "how does the wine of Lai Po taste?" "I'm sure I don't know," replied the robber. "I've never tasted it. It's just ordinary wine." At which words a silence fell over the marketplace, and everyone stared at the ground. And the king rose and said, "Is this the only person in my kingdom who dares to tell the truth?" There and then he dismissed the Lord Chancellor and appointed the robber in his place. saying, "I would rather be served by a thief than a hypocrite." And from that day forth, the wine of Lai Po was never seen in his kingdom again, for it had served its purpose, even though not one drop of it had been drunk. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.